where the story begins, with a journey, an adventure even. And what better adventure than a fantasy novel?
We associate the fantasy genre with grand adventures about heroes saving the world from great destruction. Think about stories like Lord of the Rings, wars between forces of good and evil, quests to find a MacGuffin that could change everything, and great major world-ending threats. But truth be told, I was never really the biggest fan of the traditional fantasy story. For a genre meant to spark imagination, the traditional fantasy adventure felt too safe, too typical, too dull for me to enjoy. It was, as cliché it may sound, cliché. Because of that, I never really enjoyed any fantasy books growing up. Most of their stories simply blended together for me to really enjoy. There was one exception, however. One fantasy novel I loved so much that not only is it my favorite book, but one of my favorite stories of all time. That being The City of Dreaming Books by Walter Moers. City of Dreaming Books is a 2004 fantasy novel written and illustrated by the German writer and cartoonist Walter Moers as part of his Samonia series, a series of self-contained stories set in the fictional world of Samonia. The book follows an aspiring writer on a journey to find the author of the greatest script ever written, and the dangers he faces throughout. From the moment I read the first page, I fell utterly in love with Moers' story, and still adore the book just as much today as I did over 10 years ago when I first read it. It is a brilliant gem filled to the brim with imaginative world-building, well-paced intertextual references, morbidly dark humor, and surprisingly insightful commentary. But, most importantly today, City of Dreaming Books succeeds in capturing the sense of journey and adventure characteristic of fantasy novels while setting itself apart from the norm. And that's all thanks to how it chooses to twist and bend the traditional fantasy formula by juxtaposing the typical fantasy tropes with a sense of mundanity. I'm the Arcanist, and without any further ado, allow me to tell you how City of Dreaming Books turns the mundane into an adventure. City of Dreaming Books tells the story of Optimus Johnspinner, a young writer in training who has yet to write his first novel and is waiting for the great inspiration to come. Oh, and he's also a talking anthropomorphic dinosaur. Or dragon, forgot to mention that. In my language specifically, he's referred to as a dragon, but what his species is called depends on the language. One day, John Spinner inherits a special manuscript from his late godfather and mentor, also an anthropomorphic dragon dinosaur flavor. The script was the best his godfather ever read, so good in fact he swore to never write anything again. John Spinner too is mesmerized by the script's quality, shocked to his very core about the amount of excellence it entails. This foils him to fulfill his mentor's last wish of finding the text's mysterious author. There's just a little problem though. Neither John Spinner or his mentor had any idea who really wrote the script, as his godfather received it anonymously. John Spinner has only one lead. His godfather sent the author to the place in Samonia where manuscripts become real books. And so, for the first time in his life, John Spinner leaves his home and travels to Bookholm, the City of Dreaming Books, in order to find the elusive writer behind the perfect script. The setup alone sets City of Dreaming Books apart from your usual fantasy novel. John Spinner's journey isn't some grand adventure to find the 7 magical artifacts to save the world from a great threat. Instead, it is a personal and admittedly a bit self-serving journey. John Spinner is ultimately doing this for himself, both to improve as an author and to fulfill his mentor's last request. It is a journey that matters for John Spinner and John Spinner alone. And by making it not special, is ironically what makes it special. It is the character's own personal goal that drives the story, not the larger world or external power struggles controlling the larger plot. It is ultimately a mundane goal, to find the writer of a book, plain and simple. Bookholm itself is just as mundane, yet filled with sane whimsy. It is a city dedicated to books. Bookholm lives and breathes books. There are bookstores of all kinds lingering around every corner in every street, gnomes dressed up as sentient newspapers walking around the streets telling the hottest news blaring the publishing world. There are antique bookstores of all kinds, readings of poetry at the tavern every evening, Concerts that through their hypnotic music cause listeners to go on a shopping spree trance where they must buy every book they see and hear, and so on and so forth. There's no page left unturned, no literary concept left unexplored into a wacky site in the city of dreaming books. And these concepts are explored thoroughly in the book's pages. Morse loves dwelling in detail. He goes on tangents, describing even the most mundane thing to its full extent. Entire pages are spent on describing the wacky breakfast John Spinner ate at his hotel, or the streets he walked on while exploring Bookholm. Things that are ultimately mundane, and for some, perhaps unnecessary to describe. But these details are integral in creating a sense of wonder and adventure to the story. Too often, adventure stories feel distant. We get a sense of the world for sure, but we aren't necessarily able to immerse ourselves due to how focused they are on their fights and plot. City of Dreaming books stops to let the reader smell the roses, pauses to let the world sink in. The reader is traveling the city with John Spinner. Thanks to the lengths Morse goes with his descriptions, the reader truly is immersed in John Spinner's journey and transported to the Bookholm travel with him. This isn't to say City of Dreaming books lacks traditional adventure with dangers and threats. Around halfway through the book, John Spinner gets trapped into catacombs beneath the city by reading a book that literally poisons him. John Spinner then has to try to find his way out from the endless maze, all meanwhile enduring the dangers of the catacombs. Wicked monsters hiding behind every corner, book-hunting book hunters willing to kill anyone who stands in the way of their bounty, and perhaps most dangerous of them all, the elusive Shadow King, a monster said to roam the catacombs he rules. But even if the catacombs are a more typical fantasy adventure, they still manage to capture the creativity present above by applying a literary twist to typical fantasy concepts. Take book hunters, for example. Mercenaries and bounty hunters are common sight in fantasy novels, but how often do you have mercenaries dedicating to hunting books instead of people or creatures? There is an entire list of rare and even dangerous books called the Forbidden List, decided by collectors worldwide who hire book hunters to find these elusive books. And this principle of adding a literary twist to the fantastical echoes all throughout the catacombs. The monsters dwelling in the catacombs are tied to books as well, feeding on them, camouflaging through them, or even being outright sentient living books. As John Spinner travels deeper to the catacombs, he encounters a society of benevolent gnome-like species called booklings, who spend their days reading and studying books, even naming themselves after famous Ptamonian authors. Even the Shadow King is used to this end, though explaining any further would be going into a major spoiler territory. The merger between the mundanity and the fantastical is what makes Catacombs such an unique, dangerous dungeon. Even when the adventure becomes more dire, it still manages to creatively tie literature to various creatures and locations hiding within. Ordinary concepts associated with books, literature, and reading twist and mutate themselves to unrecognizable forms that still faintly recall their original form. In the Catacombs, nothing is safe, not even a book. Words can hurt, books can kill, yet John Spinner presses on, traversing deeper and deeper into the Catacombs. His journey is filled with imaginative obstacle sites and events that capture the fantastical thrill of adventure, yet by using something so simple. And yet, City of Dreaming books never loses its heart, that being John Spinner's personal quest. Even as the journey turns deadly, it never forgets what started it. As such, City of Dreaming books never strays too far from where it started, never forgets why we are on this journey to begin with. Even at the depths of the catacombs, the journey to find the elusive author is remembered, and even pays off in unexpected ways, which is deeply refreshing. Too often in fantasy stories, the simple setup escalates to the stratosphere. Think for example how many JRPGs start simply and yet end by killing the god. But City of Dreaming books never reaches to that point of escalation, never switches gears to a grander story. The fate of Ptamonia is never at stake, not really. Even when the book reaches to its explosive conclusion, this never wanes. At the end of the day, not much changed.
John Spinner accomplishes his goal, although differently than expected, and in a way, Bookholm is irrevocably changed. Yet at the same time, not much is changed. The deeper systematic issues plaguing the city aren't addressed, nor does the events in the book really affect Simone at large. Life simply goes on. And this small scale, part of a larger world, is what makes City of Dreaming books such a special adventure. It's a journey that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, yet it matters for John Spinner and for the reader. You get deeply invested in the story and you get deeply invested in the world and the adventure because of how well Moore stakes the reader, how well detailed and creative the world is, and how ultimately mundane it is. Because at the end of the day, City of Dreaming Books is a book about books and reading and the journey to discovery. It is a fantastical one, but its core is a mundane and personal one. And that's what makes it such a special book. After all, this is where the story begins.
Thank you for watching. This is part of a video essay jam. The challenge was to make a video essay in 2 days with the team Journey, and I chose City of Dreaming Books because it's one of my favorite books of all time. I said I really love it. And originally my plan was to talk about JRPGs and video games. Not only was that way too ambitious to do in the time frame, but also it was going to involve talking about Mario and Luigi Brothers. And oh my god, that game is holding me hostage. Please send help! But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Watch the other video essays in the essay jam at the playlist and just have a good one. See ya!